Hey everyone, this is going to be a quick recap of our recent lab. We are going to cover going from Rhino to Maya and back, and we will cover shattering objects in Maya and also the bullet physics engine in Maya. We'll also, I also want to point out that there's a really good tutorial posted on our course website related to these topics, actually several tutorials, so you should use this as an intro and then dig into those tutorials as well. Okay, first thing we want to do is check our units, type units, and we want to make sure that our units are set to centimeters because this is what Maya uses. So even though we'll imagine things at an architectural scale, we will use centimeters for the ease of transferring data. Next, we're going to use sub-D surfaces. So I'm going to make a sub-D box. And you can make different types of objects. Let me set this to shaded tab. Okay. And I have a sub-D box. A sub-D is a special kind of mesh that when you hit the tab key on the keyboard, it smooths out. And if I make a mesh box, it's going to look exactly the same. However, when I hit the tab key, it doesn't smooth out. But we can always convert a sub-D into a mesh, and I'll show you how to do that. So that's what we're going to. So let's use sub-Ds. There's also a tab up here for sub-D tools, and you can find the different shapes that you can make. We're just going to make a very simple shape using Shift Control on your keyboard. You can move these faces around. You can extrude faces out. Shift, what is it? I can, holding down on Shift, scale this down. Just making a slightly more interesting shape than a box. How interesting. Shift Control, I can hold, I can grab edges. Shift Control, I can grab points and move these around like that. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. And let's grab all of these things together and scale that down. And this is looking a little bit more interesting than a box. Not too interesting, but good enough. Maybe I'll make one more tweak here. And so nothing special about this, just something to get started. We can see that we have a fold here now that I have non-planar polygon. Probably a couple folds from shifting these things around. And so just so I know where everything is, I'm going to type triangulate mesh. Let's see, let's triangulate. Oh, this is not a mesh yet, so I can't triangulate it. But I'm now going to extract a mesh from this surface. If I look over here, I really like to have the properties window open while I model in Rhino, because this is going to tell me what kind of geometry I have. And I can see here that it's a closed sub-D, but now I'm going to type extract mesh, or extract control polygon. So the command is extract control polygon. And now you can see that I have a closed mesh selected, and I'm going to pull that out. Looks a little funky. You can see the folds here, and I am going to, what am I going to do with this? I'm going to triangulate it. There we go. Triangulate the mesh. Why does it look so fun? Can I unlock? Nope. Unlock. Unweld. Let's see. Mesh. Something about the normals here. Can I do unify, rebuild mesh normals? That didn't do anything. Harden. Is there anything else that I can do here? Unify mesh normals. Okay, I thought I could improve the display here, but that was not to be. But still, it's fine. It's triangulated. Now I want to type quadrangulate mesh, and that is just going to quadrangulate mesh. I'm going to get rid of any spots where faces are pretty flat. And we don't actually need triangles, so then we just have spots where we have triangles. And if you don't like the way that a mesh is triangulated, we can flip or swap mesh edge And that's always going to, we can swap these triangles in here if we want them to be, let's say, convex versus concave. So just a little trick for mesh modeling here. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. I don't like that little, oops. I don't know what I did there. Oh, I want to do that. I accidentally swapped that edge. I didn't mean to. Swap mesh edge. There we go. Oh, okay, cool. Now, what did I want to do? I just wanted to shift control and move. Oh, come on. There we go. Enter. I'm done with that command. I want to shift control, grab that point. I'm just going to move it over. Okay, this is getting boring. Sorry. All right, let's now take this into Maya. So I want to export this, and I'm going to export it as an OBJ. That's the format that we always want to use, and we'll just call it test2 OBJ. It's going to go right to my desktop and save. And for the export options, polygon mesh objects, formatting, we wanted to definitely map Rhino Z to OBJ Y because Maya is up, or the up direction is Y, not Z. We can do not export object names, do not export layer group names, and then for mesh, we want it welded. And let's preserve n-gons, even though we got rid of them, and everything else should be fine. So we're going to hit OK. All right. Do I have Maya open? I do. Make it a new Maya. Pull it over to the right window. OK, cool. I'm on a screen with a fairly low resolution, but I think this is going to work here. All right. So now we want to file, open our scene. Oh, sorry, not open our scene, but file. Import our object. Okay, so import, and I'm just go to my desktop. Too many things on my desktop, and I'm going to search for. Can I search? Oh, because this screen is very low res compared to my other res screen. So now I want to call this test2 OBJ. Okay, import. Oh, now this thing comes in. I can fit it. All right, if I want to show the mesh wires, I can go to shading, wireframe unshaded. Now I see my object. To navigate in Maya, middle mouse button will zoom. If you hold down on Alt, then you can pivot, or I'm sorry, orbit around. If you want to set your orbit object or just zoom in on an object to a specific object, you can hit F for focus, and now when you orbit, you're going to orbit around that object. There's this little thing up here too where you can kind of zoom around, but typically I just am using the keyboard to zoom around. Okay, also what do I want to do here? When I have an object in Maya and I want to move it, the primary hotkeys that you're going to use will be Q, W, E, R, T, Y. These are the hotkeys on your keyboard. Q is select, W is move, E is rotate, R is scale. So those are the main ones, and T and Y also give you other options. But we're not going to cover those. You can see if I move it, the pivot point is not in the middle. So one of the things that we want to do here is up on the poly modeling shelf, we can center the pivot. These are also important, and you constantly press these in relation to objects because objects acquire history in Maya that kind of builds up and can bog down the object. So we want to delete history and freeze the transformations. And what does that do over here in the channel box? And if you don't see the same tabs that I do, you can toggle them on and off here and dock them to the right. But let's say if I move this, you can see that it's showing where it's been translated to. And if I translate it up, if I hit, let's see, set a pivot, freeze history, and then the critical one here is freeze transformations, it zeroes out. So now that's the new 0 position. Okay, so I want to first show how we can shatter this object. Again, Maya has so many options here that you have to change to see all of the options along the top menu. you need to tell Maya what you're interested in doing: modeling, rigging, animation, and we want to go to FX. Now it can get really cumbersome to switch between these things. So if there's a specific modeling tool that you want, you can hold down on the space bar, and then you get, for example, even though I'm in FX, I can get all of the mesh tools here, and you can see that the FX tools are now down here. So, okay. So also, when we were looking at things in class, an object that I imported looked kind of weird, and there are a couple of things that can happen. So if your object looks like the shading is not like nice, I mean, the first you can do, and maybe always it's important to assign an existing material. So this standard shader in Maya is Lambert 1. So assigning this material to your object is a good idea when it comes in from Rhino. And then also with mesh tools, you can mesh display. If the object is black, it means that the faces are pointing to the interior of the object. So what you can do is go to mesh display and reverse. And that'll flip the normals, and then you should see the material, gray material displayed. And then also sometimes you have to unlock the normals if they were locked in Rhino. I don't know how that happens, maybe when you crease the object or something like that. Okay, so now we have our object and it's clean, it's looking okay, and we've centered the pivot, we've deleted the history, we've frozen the transformations, and now we are going to go to FX and Shatter. So under FX, Shatter, and we want to look at this. When you have commands in Maya, if I could just click Shatter, but then it's going to run whatever the default or the last setting that was used for this. But this meant if you have a little window like this, you can click on that, and then we can see all of the options for the tool. And we can see that there are 3 different kinds of shatter here: surface, solid, and crack. And the ones that we're interested in are surface and solid. So Control D is how I make a copy. So I'm going to make a couple of copies of this so I can show you. Let's retain the original one. Focus back on this one. And so let's first do a solid. Let's first do a solid shatter. And so for the solid shatter, all of this should be fine. If we want to save this, I recommend this. Original surface, you can hide it, and then it won't shatter this object, but it will make a copy and should hide this one, and we can show that over here. So let's just, 4 looks fine, shard count, we're not going to, the edge jagginess, we can make it a little bit jaggy. This will give you smoother cuts, this will give you more jagged crack-like cuts, and I think that this all looks good, so I'm going to hit apply, and now it works. And one thing we can see is that the original mesh that we shattered is still there, but it's grayed out, so it's hidden, and now it makes a group and puts the shards of that shatter in this group. So for some reason it goes over into face mode. Oh, by the way, if you want to select sub-objects, like we were using Shift Control in Rhino to select edges, vertices, and faces. To get to that in Maya, you right-click the object, and then you go from Object Mode, Vertex, and Face here. And Multi should let you select other items. So, okay, so I want to, let's go to Object Mode, and now I have this like new chunk, right? And I have all of these chunks that have been shattered. Okay, cool. Now we want to, what do we want to do now? Oh, so let's say we wanted to like shatter this chunk further, right? Well, I could come back to, I want to make more chunks from this one. I could come back to shatter and say, okay, 4 new chunks, hit apply, and it says error. Why is there an error? Well, it doesn't matter actually whether or not you tell Shatter to apply an interior material. For some reason, once you run the shatter on these chunks, you have to, whether or not it's nice actually to have the yellow material, because then you'll remember that you need to select everything, right click, and again, assign Lambert one, assign the default shader to these things. And for some reason, there's just a bug that it won't shatter. So if it doesn't have the default material, or at least maybe one material applied to the object. So I'm coming back to Shatter, back here, hit apply. Now it works. Okay, cool, close. And what you can see is it makes a new group with new shards inside the other group. And you can see it's assigned this material, new material to it. So maybe what I'll do just to keep things clean is go ahead and remember to assign the existing material to that. And then maybe I don't want these little these shards a group within a group. I can go to edit and ungroup. Okay, cool. Now I have all of these groups. That was probably the shard that I split. So I since it's not highlighting, so I can just delete that one. That was the oh no, it hid that shard is what happened. It hid it and kept it in the group, but I don't need that under there anymore. So what do I want to do? I'm going to select this group, and then I'm going to hit W. I'm going to move it over to the side, just to show you that if I hold down on, if I select the original one that was hidden, Shift H will show it, so it's still under there, and Control H will hide it. But I'll just maybe Shift H since I've moved this one around. Okay. Cool. So now I have all these shards. Groovy. And if I want to break this object apart, object mode, I can just move them apart. But we're going to use bullet physics in a few to do that. Another way to shatter this. Let's say I don't want solid chunks from this, but I want to create some sort of shell, like fragments. I can go back to, I can use this other mode of shatter, which would be the surface shatter. And by default, extrude shards will be set to 0. But if I want to give it a thickness, then I can go ahead and play with this and give it a thickness. So it kind of depends, the scale, like this value is going to depend on the scale of your object, and then we're going to have to determine if it wants to be positive or negative. But let's start with just a value of 1. Maybe that's crazy, maybe it's not, we'll see, but let's hit create. You can see that it moves out. And now I have this shard. Oops. And it's funny, I think it saved our object inside. Yeah, so original object was saved inside. I'm going to go ahead and I don't want to change the scale of the object. I don't want the things to extrude out. So what I'm going to do is go back to Shatter, and I'm going to change this, but the thickness looks pretty good, so I'm going to make this -1. And then to the original surface, this time I'm just going to delete it and hit apply. Okay, close. Now, this is a situation in which everything worked, but our surface is black. And why is that? What we need to do here is select our object, and we could go back to modeling, or why don't we just do it this way? Let's do the shortcut way. Is hold down on the space bar, go to mesh display, and we want to reverse. And for some reason, when it ran the command and we used a negative value, it flipped the shelled faces inside. But now you can see that we have a shell, and so we have those fragments nested together, but they have a thickness, which is cool. So it's like now we have these like it's a hollow object versus a series of chunks, right? But we still have these nice nice fragments, which am I looking? I want to make sure that one gets. I'm just hitting undo and moving those things back. Okay, so now let's look at Bullet. What does Bullet do? Let's grab this guy. We're going to move him over. Bullet is a physics engine in Maya. I have it already loaded, but if you don't see it, then what we can do is when we can go to Windows, Settings, Preferences, Plugin Manager, yeah, Plugin Manager. And if you don't see the plugin that you want to use, like bullet. Here I have it loaded, but if you don't see it, it's not loaded. So you need to hit loaded, auto load, and then refresh and close, and then you should be fine. You should be good to go. Another one that's important is OBJ export. That one's important, but we have that. And so that's groovy, so we're gonna hit close. Okay, what do we wanna do here? So now that we have bullet loaded, we can, there are two ways to use bullet. We can, which is this one? This is the, oops, I want to do that. W, this is the chunky model. Okay, chunky model. For chunky model, we want to select bullet, and there are two ways to do it. We could just turn all these things into active rigid bodies, but we are going to use rigid sets, and we want to create this rigid set here. So rigid set, and if we want to give it a name, we'll call it bullet rigid set underscore chunk. Hit apply and close. Okay. Now, and you know what I would also recommend before you do this, make a copy of your object, just so if the simulation goes awry, you can do it again, because it's kind of hard to get it back once you've committed these things to a solver. So now we have this bullet solver, and I'm going to hit play, and you can see that they fly apart. Now you want to right click this and make sure that your playback speed is set to play every frame, max real time. By default, it might be set to play every frame free, and it will go really, really fast. And we want to make it max real time. And what's cool now that we've initiated the physics simulation, we can scrub here, and we see that it's blowing apart. And maybe that's all that we need, but maybe we don't want it to blow apart so fast. And the first thing that we need to do is, if we select the bullet solver, I can come over here to the attribute editor. This is where we can see all the attributes attached to an object. And we want to look at the chunk shape here solved. We want to look at the bullet solver shape. This is where we enable the simulation. This is where we make some changes to things. But let's first look at the bullet rigid set chunk initial state. I shouldn't have given it such a long name. No, it's the chunk. It's really not that long. It's just kind of gives it these names. So what do we want to do? The collision, so under the initial state node here, we want to go to the collision shape attribute and change this from box to hull. And what that means is that instead of putting like a box around each of these objects so it calculates faster, it's actually going to use the shape of each of these chunks. Each time I make a change, I need to come back to the solver shape and uncheck enable simulation and then check it again. And that's going to make sure that bullet gets all of the changes that we make. So now, you see now that it's set to hull instead of the shape, it's blowing apart in a nicer way because it's not assuming that they're actual boxes. And you also, these things won't like interpenetrate one another if they come into contact with one another. So what we could do here now is, what else do we want to do? Maybe we want to now increase the scale of our field. And so I'm going to change this to negative. Let's change it to a really high value, like negative 500. Unclick, enable simulation, click it back. Okay, now those things are falling. So they break apart a little bit, and that's fine, and they fall. And now if we use ground plane, boom, you can see that they actually fall on an imaginary ground plane here. And they kind of tumble around. So that's kind of fun. When you stop the playback, you can go back and it's kind of, they're going in reverse. They're kind of flying up. But if there's some shape or state of this that you like, you can take this bullet rigid set. In my case, it's got the name chunk. And if I hit Control D, I can now move that over. What do we want to do? center the pivot, freeze the transformations, and delete the history, freeze the transformations. So let's zoom in. This is something that I might want to take back into Rhino. Okay, how would I do that? What should I show you? Do you want more Rhino? More? Let's do a couple of things. I'm going to make another copy of it. And you can see that when I select this mesh, it's a bunch of different things. Or it's one thing, rather. Actually, I want it to be a bunch of different things. So if I come over to the modeling toolkit, if you don't see that, you can click one of these up here. This one, modeling toolkit. I can use a command called mesh separate. And unfortunately, it makes all of these things, for some reason, the bullet simulator, when you separate it, you get a bunch of individual faces. So we don't want that. So I'm going to hit undo and go back. Okay, now it's still one thing. Okay, cool. What I want to do before I separate it is I want to select this object. Let's go in the space bar. Mesh, edit mesh. And we want to use a command called merge. Merge gives a distance threshold. Usually the default is fine. That hits OK. And what that is going to do is weld all of these touching vertices together. That should be OK. Right click, go to object mode. And now I want to hit separate again. OK. So now these things are read as solid chunks. So that's cool. So I'm going to show you, if you forget to do that here in Maya, I'm going to show you how to deal with it in Rhino. I'm going to go ahead and just make sure that we assign our existing Lambert material. So that was just a right click and assign the existing material. And I'm going to take these things back into, what am I take them back into? Take this back into Rhino. And so I'm going to select these things, file, export selection, OBJ export. I'm going to put this on my desktop and call this for Rhino, export selection. Okay, cool. And now I'm going to come back into here. File, import from file. Just import, sorry. Desktop. Export. Is that what I call it? Export test? No. Hold on one second. What did I call it? Oh, for Rhino. All right, cool. So we want to go to desktop. Call this for Rhino object. Okay, OBJ, open. Oh, there they are. Oh, sorry, there's some things here. We want to make sure when we come back in from Rhino, we go back to, we want to map OBJY to Rhino Z. And I think that everything else should be okay. Let's see, what do we get? Now we got these objects. Let's move them over close to the origin. Zoom selected. Okay, there are these two things. Okay, this one's coming in, individual chunks, fine. This one is one thing. Okay, so first of all, let's go ahead and just give the material to the normal Rhino material. So the default material, they're not so dark. Now, if I take any of these chunks and hit explode, standard explode, oh, it's exploding this into 56 meshes. Okay, so that wasn't welded. If I explode this, this is exploding into 745 meshes. Okay, so how would we do that same merge operation in Rhino? Well, let's just do it like this. Let's go ahead and just select both of them and join them. And that makes them one mesh. Now we want to weld vertices, and weld vertices is the command. So let's type that again, weld vertices. So this is like Rhino's version of the merge command. Grab this. I'm just going to drag around both objects. Enter. Okay. Now I'm going to hit explode again. And now we get these individual chunks. and we have the same condition over here. So cool. And what do we, everything's looking okay here. And then while we're here, I'll just go ahead and show you a couple of like quick tricks if you want to start messing around with the kind of rendering here that we could just do before getting into real rendering. But let me go ahead and make just some little ground here so that we're casting on a ground. This is just a curve, planar surface from that curve. Delete the curve. Put a bounding box around this for a second. Just help me grab that. Move that to the origin. That just helps me kind of get it close to the ground. Cool. I'm gonna move this up. Bump, bump, bump. All right, nice. Okay, now shading. Let's get some shadows on here. Let's go to rendered. Okay, rendered, looking not so interesting yet. The other thing I could do here, I mean, these facets are a little weird. I mean, I could, if I want, oops, I don't want to do that. So let's just lock that thing. So this is, of course, a series of meshes. We have a couple of options here. Can we do anything to make it, what if we add creases? So crease, I'm sorry, crease, and add a bunch of creases to this. Okay, that looks fine. Now it looks less like, I don't know, there are these less like little artifacts here. That's weird. The other thing we could do is, of course, we could, if we wanted to, turn this into a poly surface, which you're more used to. And to do that, we could do mesh to nerve is the command. And that's going to give me then a closed poly surface here. That's good for Booleaning. If you want to do other operations to these things, you might just turn everything into a poly surface. You could then, once you have the poly surface, go back to just like normal mode, shaded. You could run, what is this? Where is it over here? Yeah. If you don't know this one, this is a really good one. Right click, merge all coplanar faces, and that'll just run around and, that cleans the object up quite a lot, right? Because there are a lot of internal triangles here that we don't need. Don't think you can do that to, or we guess we could try quadrangulating this mesh. Didn't do much to it. So, so one thing you could do is, get rid of all of these like extra artifacts if you don't want to see them. But that's not so critical for what we're doing here. So what we want to do is blur, go back to rendered. Okay, so now these things are looking better because I just creased all of their edges, and now I'm not seeing those other little weird things. There might be another method to do that, but I'm not going to worry about it. And now what do we want to do? Blah, 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 blah. We want to, what do I want to do? Oh, I want to get some shadows on here. So over here, rendering in the properties. Window rendering, let's go ahead and turn on the sun. Here comes the sun. All right. And we want to take the intensity down. And why? Oh, we see a little shadow there. Okay, cool. Let's take the intensity down more. Okay, now my shadows are getting brighter. I'm getting more shading on the object. So yeah, I think this intensity, making this intensity something like, I don't know, 3 looks pretty good. And now we're getting 4, looks pretty good, like that. Okay, yeah. Okay, so of course we could move this around if we don't, want to pull this apart more. We can do whatever we want. Get more space between them, whatever we need. And some, I don't know, it might not work. Yeah, not going to work for this. This is too complicated. So let's just like say, I'm not going to tell you that. All right, our sun is looking good here. Sun settings, we can come to sun settings. Maybe for this, we could just click manual control. And then we're just gonna like kind of move this around until we like the shadows for whatever. We're gonna have higher shadows, lower shadows. These more vertical, noon-like shadows are looking pretty good. And then we're just kind of keep moving this around until like we like, I don't even know what angle we're gonna render this from, but I don't know, something like this is looking, I guess, okay. It's nice there are all these little fragments inside. Okay, so once we're happy with the shadows, we could also hit okay. There's also potentially move this down closer to him. Now we're moving it through the surface like that. Okay, cool. All right, and now we want to go to ray traced. That'll give us more of a preview. Okay, that's looking good. Where do I want my angle though? I want a more dynamic angle for this. It really doesn't matter. You guys can think about a better angle. Okay, that's looking, okay, that's gonna be good enough. Good enough from now. And of course you can experiment with, you know, technical view. If you have technical view set up properly. I have a video about this on my YouTube channel. It might take a minute for technical view to pop up because these objects are pretty intricate. It's not going to work right now. Probably on the school computers it would be nice and fast. So I'm going to hit escape. But this rendered view, this is going to give us, in fact, rendered view looks pretty good. You could even mess around with screenshots of this, I think. But let's go ahead and just, let's go ahead and now that we have this set up nicely in the rendered view, ray traced gives us another preview. And I'm just going back to rendered. And then I'm going to go to render, current render. I'm going to just select the default Rhino render. And in my, instead of V-Ray, although you're welcome to use V-Ray if you're a V-Ray master. And I want to go to render properties. So another window. And I'm just going to make this the same as my viewport right now. But you can set this up over here if you want. And that should be fine. And then I want to hit render. Rhino render is coming over here. That's pretty small. So let's go ahead and stop. Go back to render settings. Render properties. Okay, they're popping up on another screen. Okay, here they are. Let's go ahead and I've locked it to the viewport aspect ratio. That's fine. Let's bump this up to 2000. I can make this good quality. Come down, and for the sampling, maybe 1,000 samples. All of this is fine. And another interesting thing that we can do. Where is it? Render channels. Let's set this to custom. Oops. Automatic. Oh, I got a little bug here. Okay. Let's select all of these. RGBA, distance, normals, and albedo. Okay, cool. Let's do that. This is all just in the render. Properties, hit OK. And now, render settings. Okay, we're rendering. And what you can see down here is we're going to get this, it's going to go to the maximum number of samples, and the longer you let it run, the better it's going to look. I might just stop it short to keep this tutorial short, so I'm just going to hit stop. And now let's look at a couple of things. We had all these channels here, right? So we can show there is no alpha. There's this cool distance channel. There's this cool, what's the albedo channel? Maybe that must be, or is this the normals? I guess there's no albedo. What is this? Alpha, this is the distance, this is the normals. Normals are cool. Because that's going to give us, when we go into Photoshop, some options. Okay, cool. So now we're just going to file, and what we could do is let's just save this default rendering, and we're going to do that with save, and I'll just put it on my desktop. Render default, and let me open up Photoshop while this is happening. Photoshop. Okay, and I guess I could take this. This might be interesting, probably not, but let's go ahead and just save this too. Save. We are calling this render distance, and the groovier one. Oh, it's giving me this little thing over here. Save the RGBA channels instead of the display channel, and that's no. It's trying to prevent you from making a mistake and like accidentally not saving the main rendering. But we want to say no. We want to save this channel that we're showing, and we'll do that operation again for render normals. Okay. Again, no, we want to save this channel. Okay, so now we have these colorful channels, which are cool. And in Photoshop, I'll just show you how you can, so I did one over here. I guess it got moved. This is the one I showed you, and I guess at the very end of my lecture, just messing around. Let's go ahead and open these three drawings. Okay, so this is our default. This is our normals, render distance. So if I select this one and paste it over this one, and then change the layer setting here, you can see that there's we can get some sometimes interesting effects. Nothing too interesting. It seems like these are kind of interesting, but seems like maybe normal, dissolve, darken, kind of interesting. Oh, multiply, kind of interesting. I mean, we could potentially take this down, the opacity down, that if we think that adds something to it. Not that much. One thing we might do first, though, is go to our adjustments here and go to maybe the curves. And we can make this more dramatic just by changing the curves here in the adjustment layer. Add a little more to that. We're not going to do anything with this for now, so let's just go ahead and delete it. But what I'm more interested in are the normals here. Let's see. There we go. And let's see what happens now when we start messing with this. We can kind of pull this over on top. And it's not that interesting so far. What if we do Control U? We could try changing saturation, hue. We can get different colors here. Lightness, darkness, saturation, colorize, kind of makes it all one color. But these are not that interesting yet. So what's a way that we could start adding color to this? Under adjustments, there's a gradient map. So let's make a gradient map, and then gradient map, layer mask. Okay, cool. And then here, there are some options. We could try like an iridescent gradient, something like that. Something like this. Just play around with this. Greens, oranges, something kind of bright. Let's get started with that. But then we can click on that gradient, and we should be able to add some more stops. Oops, I deleted one. How do I add one? Add a stop. There we go. How do I do that? Oh, I just put the little finger in here. Okay, cool. So now I can give that a different color by, okay, that's cool. Click on that little box, change this color to something here, bum, 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 bum. Okay, so now I'm adding more color to this. Okay, let's just save that as a new gradient, hit okay. Now, this is my gradient map, and I don't want it all over everything. So what can I do? I'll turn that off. And one thing I want to do here is maybe, where is this? Get my little magic wand here. There was something called a subject. Curve layer 1. That's why I want to be in this. Oh. Remove backgrounds. This is kind of new in Photoshop. Select subject. Let's do it like this. Remove, select subject. Oh, that worked kind of well. But let's try this. Remove background. Oh, yeah, that worked really well. Okay, cool. So what it does is when I hit that remove background, it got rid of all of the white stuff. I can go ahead and make a new layer. Select all, Shift 5, put in my foreground color. It's just white. Oh, dude. Okay, I'm going to make sure that that's behind there. Okay, cool. All right, so now this gradient map, yeah, that kind of got applied to everything. But what I want to use is this. So if I hit Alt, hold on Alt and click in here, I can get this mask. And I can Control C, hold that, and then Alt click into the gradient map mask. And, oh, come on. Yeah, there we go. Paste that map into there. Now when I turn on this gradient map, okay, yeah, it's just my object, which is getting the color instead of all the other stuff. Okay, that looks better. Okay, cool. A little more vivid. There we go. Now I could just kind of, maybe I could crank that down a little bit. But let's mess around with these layer filters here or something like that. Oh, that's kind of cool. Lighten, screen dodge. You can get different interesting kind of color effects here, like that. Like any of these. Maybe I'll just do this one. Okay, cool. Now, one thing we can, if we go back, we can see that the color, like the mask for this, was Alt. When I did the remove the background, it thought that that was part of the background because it's white. So one thing I can do here is let's kind of make sure I'm going to put black as my foreground color. Clicked in here, and I'm going to use the magic wand, select that, and I'm going to go into my mask by holding Alt. I just want to delete that. I guess I could have just drawn a little box around it. Now the reason I'm doing that is because that's part of the object, not part of the background, so I don't need it as part of this mask. And then Alt, again, clicking that, gets me back into this. This gives me that. I don't want that one. And I don't know if I see a little color on there or not. Maybe not, because it was all washed out. Now with this gradient map, I could Control U, or what happens if I rasterize this? Duplicate, I can't rasterize it. Okay, cool. All right, fine. Can I do anything to this? Can't do anything to this. I mean, one thing I could do, I suppose, here, if I want a little more control, I can screen it. I can certainly like bring that down, but that's not helping me a lot. I have this on screen. Oops. What do I want to do here? Well, I could take this whole layer and I could duplicate it. And now, let's get rid of Oh, sorry, there's a little box over here. Yep, duplicate that. Maybe now I want to pull this all the way up here. And then I could, that's not helping me too much. What I want to do is not, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a whole, I'm going to make a, oops. Nope, that's making a new layer. Down here with history, I'm going to make a copy of this drawing. And then I'm going to layer, I'm going to flatten it. Now it's just one thing. Shift Control L, that plays with the things. I can just hit Control L, and I could change the way that this is all happening. I want to bring that up, make it less washed out. Shift C. Come back here, paste that on top. Maybe I could just even hide everything. So now I just have that base drawing, and then I could play with the opacity. I could play with what happens if I mess around with these layer filters again. Not so interesting. But now that this is a flat thing, I can go to Control U. Control U allows me to shift the color on that. Change the saturation, desaturate it, so I could do things like that. You will hopefully have a higher resolution drawing, like let it render longer. Any other quick things I can do with this? You can always play with the layer filters. See if there's anything interesting. Kind of interesting, but not that interesting. Okay, cool. All right, so there's a quick ways of getting some color and materiality on it just in Photoshop without messing around with materials. Does this do anything? Let's bring that back and see what happens if I bring that on top of. This is not really doing anything for me, so I'm just going to delete you. Okay, cool. All right, so I mean, we can do that. I guess we could try one more thing and see what happens if we add again another. What is it? Vibrance, color. Where was it? Curves. Curves. We can adjust this more if we wanted to. Something like that. Okay, well, I'll let you play around it, and you may have some Photoshop skills up your sleeve as well. Oh, the other thing that you can do, and maybe I will just show you this in closing, is to go back to a drawing, a Rhino file. What did I do before? That was helpful. Let me pull up this Rhino file that had some other examples. So the tutorials on Carmen also show some other things that you can do with Bullet without messing with Shatter. So like you could stack objects. And so here's another thing that I did going between Maya and Rhino. And this was a stack of boxes, and I shattered the boxes. Oh, in this case, I did actually shatter some of the boxes. Maybe I shattered all the boxes. That's what I did. I made a collection of boxes. I shattered the boxes, and then I sent a sphere crashing into them, so it looks like they're exploding apart. And some of the tutorials online show you how to do this. And then when I was making a little drawing, quick image, which was this Photoshop drawing, pull this one, no, yeah, this one. So there's all of the same kind of techniques here with gradient and curves, and like this was the original. Where's the original image? That was the original image. But I think why I got slightly richer results with this one is that I did assign some color to the objects in Rhino, just basic materials in Rhino before I brought the before I did the rendering, and then that gave me more variety. So that's how I got more variety for that image. And that's what I should have done when I was looking at this one. Go back to this. Just assigning some basic colors to this, you know, and from the default material, making maybe a new material, plaster, and then just simply giving it a color of like a cool color of some sort, like that. That's not cool enough. All right, something, right? And so then you could like have different colors on different layers, and that could be like a great, you know, because now if I make a layer using this color, right, I want to assign this material to that layer, purple plaster, okay, and then I could put, you know, like some of these things on here. And you know what, oh, did I change object layer? And then, oh, maybe if these things need to, the material needs to use layer material, that's why. Okay, cool. There we go. Yeah, and then so we get different, by the way, really good place to get color palettes for this class, Adobe Color Wheel. And this is very cool. Like you can get like a complementary set of like colors here, but there's also like, where is it, Explore? This is very cool. So then you could just like grab these and use your color picker to get different color palettes, which are vibrant, and the colors also, they have some relationship to one another. Like they have some color harmony. Go to trends. So again, this is coloradobe.com, and you could go to trends, and then like you can find these different color palettes. Oh, hey, I think that's the actor from The Bear. Okay, not the main one, the Copenhagen. Okay, so don't need to look at email right now. So that'll give you better results before you go into your rendering. Now, if we go back into the rendering here, we're going to have some color to work with when we go into Photoshop, and then like you might get more interesting results from these things. Okay, so oops, stop the rendering. Yes. Okay, and so just to, I'll conclude by showing you like some of the surfaces that So this shattered fragmented thing actually came from this. And I took this stack of boxes into Maya and then used Bullet to explode them apart. Another thing that I did with, go back. These two color coordinated things. Some of these things are shelled, but they were only solid. They were solid coming back from Maya. I also then converted all of the meshes to a poly surface using mesh to NURB, and then used that command, right click, merge all coplanar faces. But to open them up, I used a command called shell, and this is a really good one if you don't know it. In Rhino, you can pick a face, and then, oops, that's pretty thick. Kind of cool, but shell, I'm going to use a thickness of 0.5, and now if I pick this face, it doesn't always work, but usually it does, and that's going to give a thickness to this thing, so I'm going to do it again, and maybe make that thickness 0.2. Right, it's going to give a little bit more interest to this. The other thing I could do is, with shell is like, if I select one face, it's just going to make it's going to shell just like an extruded hole in it. But if I pick two faces, it actually shells like that. Sometimes the objects are a little complicated and then they fail, but you can often, you could get like, oh, that was kind of a weird, oh, but that one worked. So you can use shell in pretty interesting ways. show all this other stuff. Right, and so if I come over here to this, and shell should work very nicely with this. So again, it's just to show, these are meshes. Yeah, so properties window, those are meshes, so shell won't work. But if I mesh to nerve this, now I want to select the poly surface. I've got the poly surface shell. I'll go to shaded here so you can see it. Oops. Oh, let's go ahead and delete it. Give me some. Merge all coplanar faces, right click. Okay, now shell. So like that gives me just like one open face. If I do it like this, oops, shell. If I do like that, then it does that. So that can be really useful if you didn't know, for Studio, if you don't know that one. Okay, so have fun, make some groovy things. I hope this helps you get a little bit acclimated to the Rhino to Maya workflow. But definitely watch the other tutorials that I've put online because they go into a little bit more depth. And if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks.